So now that we have our character with a throw animation, we will need to create a knife he can throw through the air. And to do that, we'll have to create a prefab of our throwing sprite or throwing knife sprite. So we have to go to sprites and go to the character folder again. And somewhere in here, there should be a knife here. Yeah, so this knife will need to be changed into a prefab. So take it from the sprite folder and drag it into the scene. And when you have done that, we will need to create a prefab of it. So go to the prefab folder and drag the knife back down here and delete it from the scene. I'm just going to rename it to knife like this. And then we will have to rotate it correctly. So if we take the knife back into the scene actually and go to the scene view and mouse over the scene view and press F, then it will zoom in on the knife. And as you can see here, you can put the mouse in one of the corners and rotate it so that it points in the right direction. And you'll see that it needs to go minus 90 degrees to rotate to the right. So let's just say that the right side, this direction here is the default one when it has minus 90 degrees. So take the knife here and put it back onto the prefab so that the prefab has the minus 90 degrees on it. And then delete the knife from the scene. Okay, so what we need to do now is to create a script for the knife so that it moves through the air when the player throws it. So go to the scripts, right click on the script folder, click create and create a C# script, and we're just going to call this knife. This script needs to go on the prefab, so go back to the prefab folder, select the knife, click add component and write knife. And there you have it, the knife script. When you've done that, we need to open up the knife script because we need to write some code in here so that the knife can move in a direction. First of all, we need a speed. So you make a private float speed, and we simply just make this a serialized field so that we can set it from the inspector when we are testing this. Then we need a private rigidbody 2D, my rigidbody, just as we did on the player. And then we need a direction because the player can face right and face left, and we'll need to make sure that he throws it in the direction that he's facing. So we can make a private vector 2 and call it direction. So this one should decide which direction we are throwing the knife in. Then we need to go to start and say my rigid body dot equals get component rigid body 2D. So this means that the knife needs a rigid body on it, but I actually want to show you something pretty cool for the script, because if you have a script that is dependent on a component, you can make sure that that component is added to the object that the script is added to, so that you'll never get a null reference in that way. Because on top of the class here, you can make a bracket here called require component. Then you can open a parentheses and say type of, I think, and then say rigid body, or do I just need to say rigid body 2D? Maybe I don't need type of, just like this. Let's see here, type of. Yeah, I do need the type of. Okay, so you can go on top of the knife here and write require component type of rigid body 2D, and then save it. So this means when you attach this script to any component or any, not any component, any game object, it will put on the rigid body 2D. So let's try to go to our editor. And if we go to the prefab here, and we remove the knife script, and we add it again, you'll see that it also just added the rigid body for us. So because the script needs the rigid body and we put require component, well, then it also adds that. So now we don't need to put it on every time we put a script on something else that can be thrown, for example. Yes, first of all, gravity scale. I don't want gravity scale on it because the knife should just go straight. If you want it to fall towards the ground, of course, put a gravity scale. But in this 2D game, I think he just throws the knife and then it goes straight in the direction he wants. Speed, you can start with 10 just for testing. And yeah, then we need to go back to the script. Or actually, let's do it step by step. In the script, we will need to add a fixed update. So we write void fixed update. And in the fixed update, we'll have to say my rigid body dot velocity equals direction multiplied by speed. There we go. So now we should be moving in the correct direction. Let's try to play the game. And let's see, we have a... Yeah, the direction, of course, is not set right now. So we'll have to set it somehow. Let's say as standard direction is equal to vector2 dot right. Let's save this. And let's try to play again. So if we play the game now, and we take the throwing knife here, and we pull into the scene, it should spawn and move to the right here, as you can see, if I follow the knife. And it just spawns on its standard position, which is here. We can just move it up, just for now when we're testing at the player's position, so we can see it here. So if you want to see it in the game window, you can just move it to the player's position, then put it back in here. And if you play the game again, we of course need to do this from the script, but we can put in knives here and they all just spawn and move to the right, as you can see here. But as you can see, we have lots of knives here, and the knives are actually outside our view and we don't need them anymore, but now we have lots of knives we don't need. So we need to remove them somehow. And we can remove them by going to our script for the knife and override the onBecameInvisible function. And the onBecameInvisible function will be called when something becomes invisible to all renders, which means that when our knife gets outside the camera's view, then onBecameInvisible it gets called and we can destroy the knife. So this thing with renders works for every single object here, every single camera, which means if I can see the objects with my scene here, well then onBecameInvisible is not going to be called because it's also using the same rendering system as the game window. So when you're testing it, you will need to zoom all the way in or something so that this scene doesn't interfere with the game window. Of course, when you build the project and export it, then there's not going to be a problem because there's no more cameras than that one camera you're viewing at the moment. Yes, let's try to do this. Going to write void onBecameInvisible. And in here we say destroy game object. So now we are destroying the game object itself. Which means if we play the game now, and let's see if I zoom in here so I can't see the knife in my scene, I would take the knife and throw it, and you'll see it gets deleted when it gets outside the screen here. You could argue that you might want to have a game where the knife moves outside the screen so you can shoot some enemies, you know, if they're there. So later maybe we can put a lifetime on the knife so we delete it after a while or something. But for now, let's just delete it when it gets outside the screen. As you can see, if I zoom out here, then I can see the knives all the time, so they don't get deleted even though they get outside the screen of here. But if I zoom in, it disappears right away when it goes outside this view I have here. So that's how onBecameInvisible works. So that's one of the things. Another thing is that we need to be able to tell which direction we want to throw the knife in from the player's perspective. So when the player turns to the left, we will need to tell the knife to move to the left. So we can make a function here. Let's actually just go to the player first, because inside the player we'll have to have a function called throw knife or something. So let's make a function. Where should we do it? Here in the bottom. We can make it private, or actually make it public. Public void throw knife. And we need a value here. And we're going to use the value to figure out which direction we should throw the knife in. Or not direction, sorry, if we are on the ground or if we're in the air. Yeah, but just make the value here. I'll explain later when we actually need to use it. Then we are going to figure out what direction we need to throw the knife in. So we say if facing right. So if we're facing right, we need to throw the knife to the right, and else we need to throw it to the left. So underneath here we write else. And make a scope. There we go. So we will need to be able to instantiate the knife from the player. So we need a reference to it. So in the top here, underneath, let's say, or just above, where do we want to do it? Let's just do it here after jump force. Make a private game object and call it knife prefab. So this is going to be the knife prefab, and we're going to serialize the field like this. So now we have this prefab, and we need to instantiate it here. So we can say to add the knife to the game, instantiate knife prefab, and we need to instantiate it on, yeah, let's give a position. We need a position for instantiating the knife, but right now let's just do it at the player's position. So transform the position and quaternion.identity, because we don't need to rotate anything. And yeah, let's just do it like this for now. Maybe later we need to rotate it in the right direction. Yeah. So when we've done that, we need to do the same thing down here. And save. Okay, so we need to throw this knife somewhere. Later we are going to make sure that the animation throws the knife for us, but for now let's just test it by pressing the V button. So if we go to the get input, down here on the throw, just write throw knife and put 0 as a parameter here, because we don't need right now. We're going to change a little in the function, but just put 0 here for now. So if we do this, oh, we need to put a reference. So if we click on the player, you'll see that the player will have a knife prefab down here. So we have to take the knife from the prefab folder and drag it onto the player. And then we play. And if we press the V button, you'll see that it actually instantiates a knife here to the same direction all the time. So now you can see the knife is not rotated. That's why I didn't want to put a rotation right now. Because when you set quaternion.identity, it just puts the same rotation as the player, for example, or a 0 rotation. So right now we are throwing knives that are upright, right, and we are not throwing them in the right direction. So let's try to rotate the knife. If we go down here, if we're facing right, we need to rotate it to the right, and that was -90 degrees, I think. So here we can say quaternion.Euler equals new vector 3 and 0, 0 point -90. There we go. And one more. And one more. Need 3, yeah. So do the same, copy this quaternion.Euler and paste it down here. And say +90. That can go. So now we can already see a difference between facing left and facing right. So if we save this, now when we have added a rotation to our knife, we should be able to see the knife rotating in the direction we're facing. So now you can see it faces that direction, and if I turn here, it's still going to go this way, but you can see that it actually goes in. Yeah, it's rotated in the right direction here, as you can see here. So now we need to make sure that we can actually throw them in the right direction. So to do this, we will have to add a function to the knife, because the knife needs to know what direction it needs to go. So this means that we need to go to the knife script and create a new function called public void initialize. I hope I spelled it correctly. And here in the initialize function, we'll have to add a direction to the knife so that we know which direction it needs to fly in. So basically we need to tell it that it needs a vector 2 called direction, and this direction we give in should be, we have to say this dot direction equals direction. So what we're doing here is we're creating initialize so that we can access it from our player. When the player throws a knife, it needs to access the initialize function on the knife it just threw, and here we need to give in a direction based on the player's facing direction, and this direction will be set equal to the direction we have up here, so that when we are moving the object down here, when we're moving the object down here, it will use the direction we just set in the initialize function here. So we can actually delete this line 18 in our start, that one with that says direction equals vector 2 dot right, because now we can set it. And the reason I write public here is because I want to access it from the player. We can try to delete public and I can show you how it works. If we go to the player and we want to initialize this knife, then we need a reference to it. Let's say game object temporary equals this, and then we have to cast it to a game object because we're instantiating something, and we need to make sure that we get the game object here. And then we can say temporary dot get component knife to access the knife script that is sitting on the knife we just created up here. So this is our knife we just instantiated in the game, and then we take the knife we just created and gets the knife component, and then we say knife dot, and then we should be able to access the initialize. But you can see we don't have access to the initialize right now because it's private, so we have to go in here and write public. Public, and then we have to save this. And if we jump back to the player and press start now, then you'll see that initialize appears, so we can access it from other scripts when something is public. And then when you open the parentheses, it's asked for a direction here, and the reason that it asks for a direction is because we defined it with a direction here. So that's the direction we should be throwing the knife in. So where are player? Here, and we say vector 2 dot right if we are facing right, and down here we say vector 2 dot left. There we go. And we need to create the game object the same way down here. And actually we could make it easier by taking some of the stuff and move it up here, but let's just keep it as it is now. So let's try to save this and jump back into Unity. So now the character should throw the knife in the right direction as well. Now we throw it to the right. Oh, now we are actually not even viewing them. Let's see why. Oh, we are actually viewing them. I think I forgot to give it a... Let's see, it's not moving at least. Let's figure out why. Facing right. Here I forgot to give it a... I cut it before, of course. So I need to move it, not copy it. So now it has a direction both places, so it should have right here. And let's try one more time so we can throw it in both directions. So when we're on the ground, we throw the knife in that direction. When we're facing left, we throw the knife in that direction. So now we can throw a knife in both directions. So in the next video, we are going to have a look at how we can instantiate it from our animation and instantiate it at a better time and position, because right now it spawns on the player. We would like it to spawn on his hand or something when he just throws it, so it looks more real, or what should I say. But yes, inside the throw knife, make sure that you have facing right and have both the game object and initialization and the same down here. Yes. So thank you for watching this part, and as usual, remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it, follow me on Twitter, and like my Facebook page. And also remember that this is a community founded site, so if you really like my tutorials and you want to support it, then please do so by either going to the Patreon link, where you will get some extra perks like private tutoring or early access to videos, and of course also all my projects. Or if you don't want to support that much, you can also just support me by getting this current project here or any of my other projects by following the link on the screen right now.